Dig your hand in the land. We're gonna have a meeting, everybody.
Is really is really unique in Minnesota right now. And if you think about 2021, I always say you got to think about like 2018, and that's kind of when I started or I took over was the end of 2018. And 2018, we had the lowest farm income that we had had in 23 years, average about $26,000. And we had had low farm prices for quite a few years leading up to that too as well. And then we went to 2019, which was the wettest year on record. We had, potatoes and beets and everything in Northwest Minnesota that didn't get planted or didn't get harvested, froze in the ground. We had over 1 million acres in Southwest Minnesota that didn't get planted. 2020 started to look good. We signed the new NAFTA. China, promised to buy all kinds of soybeans and corn. And then we slipped into COVID. And so that really affected a lot of us. We've well documented a lot of the issues that we had with COVID and meat packing plants and all the stress and everything that put on a lot of things. But we did have a good fall last year. And so that was helpful. We had a nice harvest. We had, good prices. We didn't have to dry the crop a lot. And so that was helpful. But now, as of course, we got to 2021, turned the page, thought, well, farmers had a good income year last year. Prices are good. We're going to do great. And we've ended up with, more than 50% of the state in D3 drought, worst drought we've seen, at least in Minnesota since 1988 for much of the state. It is good to see like southern Minnesota to see. I was in Austin over the weekend for a meeting and an event, and to see the crops looking really good down in southern Minnesota, but there are parts of southern Minnesota that are really compromised too. So right now in the state of agriculture, we're really focused on the drought and rebuilding from COVID and really trying to come out of COVID. And I'd say like one thing in COVID that COVID has provided us the opportunity to really look at our food supply and our system that we have and really change and make some opportunities, and come back to that in a minute. But, the drought, I just want to encourage everybody that MDA has been leading drought calls for 3 months now. Every other Friday, Farmers Union's been really involved in our drought efforts. We've opened up state DNR and rim lands across the state to get farmers some grazing and haying options. The governor waived hours of service on trucking for farmers that are moving hay and livestock. Talked to a farmer this morning, one who was bringing grass and hay from Iowa up to northern Minnesota and back and forth for several loads, wanted to be sure where he was on his hours of service. We also have a lot of farmers in northern Minnesota that are moving their cattle to pastures in southern Minnesota this year. And so having that hours of service was really important. The other thing we did was we waived we included the drought in our disaster relief loan program at the Department of Agriculture, which is a zero interest loan. And Gary Werdish, president of Minnesota Farmers Union, serves on the board of the RFA, as well as Carol Anderson. And so that is a zero interest loan. We just issued our first loan last week, and we have many more that are coming. That was to a dairy farm to buy feed. And so those options are out there, and and just want farmers to be aware of them. And we'll put it in the chat here, our drought assistance. And so I think that's really, really important as we go. We are considering a special session drought package for really focused on livestock and specialty crop growers, crop and lives. A lot of the crop farmers have a decent crop insurance program, but a lot of the livestock farmers just don't have something that'll really help them tide over. And we've seen huge sell-offs of cattle. I myself have stopped at the Bagley sales barn, the Motley, Winger, just seen the amount of cattle, even at the one at Rock Creek here a mile from my house, in those sell-offs of cattle. And so we are looking at, are there things that we could do to help those growers make it into next year a little easier and keep every farmer that we have. So we're looking at being able to reimburse for a lot of water-related projects, whether that's drilling a well, working with your well, moving water, fencing, and seeding pastures is going to be a really big issue, seeding cover crops, things like that. And then same with specialty crops too as well. So working with Farmers Union on that and other groups, that would be helpful. Just a couple other things I'd mention in the agency that I think are really important in the state of agriculture are something Farmers Union's been a real leader on is meat processing. Farmers Union's really led the way on, and really highlighted during COVID that we had a large backup of pigs. And we had it before we had the shutdown of the JBS plant and the Worthington plant. And and so I think that's really something that we need to keep addressing. We did get, a nice, over $1 million from the legislature to invest in meat processing this year. And one of the other things I think is really important that Farmers Union's helped with is working with Central Lakes College and AURI to help build out some of the support system and staff that help build those smaller meat plants, because a lot of the locker plants I talked to when we had grant money last year, they couldn't expand, or weren't interested in expanding because they couldn't hire anybody else to help. And so that was really an interesting issue. So we got to address that issue. Water quality continues to be a big issue across the state. We are making progress. So I'd encourage people to look at our Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. We just went over 1,100 farmers, and we're closing in 800,000 acres enrolled in that. And we just see a lot of good things coming of that. I was at Tom Cotter's farm, as I said, in Austin. And I was at the Sharing Our Roots farm in Northfield, both water certified farms last week. And I didn't plan that they just are, but it was cool to see the different things that they're doing, and really encourage people to look at that as we get there. So but that meat processing is really part of our effort to really expand our local foods across the state in the department. We're building out our farm to school program, value added grants, and a lot of other things at the department. A couple other things I just mentioned, and glad to take some questions. Trade continues to be an interesting issue. We're working on taking our first virtual trade mission, our first in-person trade mission in November. The governor and myself and quite a group are going to England, or United Kingdom, I should say, and that'll be our first in-person trade mission in almost 2 years. And so those are really valuable. They're really interested in dry edible beans, our #1 export to the UK, but they're also starting to buy ethanol for air quality, and that's a really big issue. As well as we look at our climate and a lot of different things that they and other countries around the globe are seeing, that ethanol and E10 or E15 can be a really important part of that. Farmers Union also really helped with that at the legislature this year, and helping us secure over $3 million a year in grant funding for building out E15 infrastructure. And so we continue to do virtual trade missions with and in-person meetings when we can. But it's been a difficult year to do a lot of those type of programs. So really encourage the department. We have a lot of interesting grants coming up soon. Our value added grant program. Like I said, that'll help our meat processing. Our livestock grant program's open right now. Farm to school grants will be coming open at some point. And so really just encourage people to look at that and that kind of things. But kind of with that, Kyle, I'm glad to take some questions, and just kind of, I'd say like state of agriculture, it's, one thing that's really good about Minnesota is we're really equally balanced between grain and livestock. So our cash receipts are, within I'd say within $1 billion, which is, amazing for a state as large of ours, that we're really balanced. But things could be better with the weather and everything. But appreciate the opportunity to visit today on a few issues.
Yeah, no, thank you, Commissioner. That was a really helpful overview of what's happening in Minnesota. Looking at the questions here, we have a couple here about special session. You mentioned special session as a potential here. We had heard potentially a September special session. As we head into sort of mid-September here, do you foresee a special session? And you outlined your priorities, but do you see that happening? I know we recently, Farmers Union sent a letter, President Werder sent a letter to the new Senate Majority Leader, Jeremy Miller, outlining what we would like to see in a September special session or whenever? Do you foresee that taking place?
I do, and that special session was really aimed, Kyle, at frontline workers and frontline worker pay, and they're really close, I think, on a agreement on that. And it'll be interesting to see. A lot has been focused on nurses, doctors, as it should be, nursing home workers, but they're also on the frontline worker pay. I just say that there is some consideration for grocery store workers, meat packing workers, people that had to milk cows every day. So I don't know how that'll end up. But in that discussion, there's been a lot of talk as should we do something for drought? And I think with the state, with the surplus that we have, and with the dollars that we have coming in from the American Rescue Plan, and I should mention that too in a minute, but so I think that there are dollars and the interest available, and there are things that we can do to help our farmers right now. It's a little hard too, because there are federal programs that could help, but sometimes federal programs do take a long time and have a lot of caveats where the state can move a little swifter. One other thing I want to mention is next legislative session, the federal government, they passed the American Rescue Plan, and the legislature and the governor agreed to next session allocate $1.5 billion to that, and that's going to be decided on. And so the governor has an open portal right now for organizations and individuals, and we can maybe try to share that through your organization to make comments on how we would spend that $1.5 billion. Wisconsin just put out $50 million in direct payments to their farmers. They'll get anywhere from $500 to $3,500 depending on, and not every farmer will get it. It's kind of a first come, first serve type of situation. Other states are taking a lot of money and putting it all into meat processing, and just supersizing that. Other states are putting, Washington State put $3.5 million into farmers markets. And so that's a good possibility too, as we look at it. But I think I would look at a special session that first week in October.
Sure. Good to know. Yeah, and you mentioned our frontline workers. We do have a question in the Q&A. What can MDA do to help farmers who need access to mental health services? Sort of transitioning into that sort of piece. Is there anything that, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that, I just got, talking to another commissioner in another state, Minnesota, we maybe have some of the best resources that any state has for helping with mental resources, and I think mental health resources. And I think that is really important. Again, on the front page of our website, we have a link right there that says coping with stress. And that is what's really helpful, where you can talk to 2 counselors across the state. Many of you know Ted Matthews or Monica McConkey that farmers can talk to for free. And that's something, again, that Farmers Union really supported, was adding that second mental health counselor, because Ted is very busy, unfortunately. And the drought really adds to that. I talked to Ted here and Monica in the last week. And, we've unfortunately known farmers that have taken their life this past year is very, just very, you just think, boy, I could have done more. What could I have done in that situation? And, I think the one thing I always impart with people is, if you think you need help, make the call. If you think, somebody needs help, you got to ask more than once. Sometimes people call me a lot as commissioner. I get a lot of calls every day from farmers. And most people don't call me to chit chat and tell me how great things are going. They're calling to tell me, something's not so good, and a lot of times when I talk to farmers, well, let me just say real quick, we also have our farm advocates. We have 10 of those around the state, and they help farmers also in distress. They're free of charge too, again, and they kind of can triage the situation. And I can't tell you over my time when I work with Farmers Union, how many farms I sent to those advocates, but they help sort out a lot of that financial work. But farmers would call me and they'd say, here's what's going on, here's a problem. And I'd say, well, you really need to consider calling Ted Matthews, or you need to consider calling an advocate, and then they call me back a week later and I'd say, did you call Ted, or did you call the advocate? And they'd be like, no, you know, and I had thought about it, but, you know, so I just kind of keep gently doing that. And then, you know, I would talk to them later and they finally made that call, and they just the relief that they would have was, you know, just so important, you know. And a lot of people too, they call and it's a little too late, but very good question. So we have great resources with the advocates, and with that, we also, the department is going to be announcing a very large grant that we just received from the USDA to continue doing more outreach on suicide prevention. We did some things with like Red River Farm Network called the Transformation Radio show, and other things that we'll be able to do to work to combat this very important issue.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've got a question, a little bit of feedback. I apologize for that. We have one question via direct message here about emerging farmers working group. It says it was mentioned at a meeting this person was at. Does the department have any plans to target and support emerging farmers?
Yeah, and that's really a good, you know, a great question and everything. And that was one of the first things I did was, you know, as commissioner, I really wanted to put together a beginning farmer group, or a new farmer group, you know, that really helped to attract and work on a lot of those issues that, you know, I knew over my time with Farmers Union. And I also had been president of Farmers Legal Action Group, that I'd worked with a lot of farmers that who are Hmong or Somali or Kenyan, Native American, who were kind of new to to farming, and there was a lot of interest in that, but it was very hard for them to communicate. You know, they didn't always listen to the Linder Farm Network or even belong to Farmers Union, but they wanted to get information, they wanted to get started. So we tried to figure out what's the best way to do that. So I thought about, you know, convening a group to do that. And at the same time, I worked with Senator Fong He, Hmong senator from St. Paul in the legislature, to kind of help develop this idea of a group. And then I chose Commissioner Patrice Bailey, who many of you know, to become our commissioner. And Patrice, you know, I charged him with starting, you know, this emerging farmers working group. And Patrice had led the Council on African Americans and worked on outreach for that, and had done a lot of outreach. And so we did convene a group. We've been meeting for over a year now. And, you know, we had a lot of good things happen at the legislature this year. We were able to hire a coordinator for that position to work with emerging farmers. We're able to expand a lot of our programs and outreach. As I said, we doubled our farm to school, our urban ag grants this year in the legislature. We were able to improve our FarmLink program. If you're not familiar with that, that is a program that helps farmers find land and also mentorship. So we have a lot going on with emerging farmers. Again, really proud of a lot of the work we're doing there. And you'll see more and more work coming out of that as we move forward.
Great. So I've got questions coming in, chat, Q&A, and text. So I've got a text question here from someone watching, and they said, this past session, a bill to create an ag license plate was passed. When can we expect that license plate to be available, and what might it look like?
Oh, that's a good question. Does anybody in the chat have some ideas of what should be on that? Because I was like, wow, how do you know, and so basically the bill that passed, and again, thank you Farmers Union for your support. It was a bill I worked on. You know, we worked on it about Krista Williamson, who's a Farmers Union member, had this idea probably 15 years ago. And we worked on it for a while, and then we stopped and picked it back up again. The FFA did, and 4-H. And so the bill passed this session will creates an ag license plate that will have the money go to support 4-H and FFA. We announced at Farm Fest a contest between FFA and 4-H to design that, and they have been coming in. The designs quite I have to check and see, but I know some had come in here this last week. And then the commissioner of MnDOT and myself will select the designs. And so that's really hard, because you know, you got this much room to work with on a license plate. And what do you put on there? Corn? Do you put a farmer on there? What does the farmer look like? Do you put corn, soybeans? Do you put a goat, a pig? Do you just put something generic? I think that I think whatever we do, there'll be a tremendous support, because I think people are very proud to support those organizations and very excited. But it's going to be a couple of months yet, but I hope that they're available next spring.
Great. I can attest to the challenges of designing in a small space. I manage all the digital communications for Farmers Union and all of the graphics, and sometimes it takes hours just to get the fonts right and all that. So I sympathize with whoever has to design it, because
and I'd say too that other states have them. I visited with Commissioner in Tennessee and Kentucky and other states that have ag license plates, and they had some real interesting tips for me on what sells and what doesn't, and so we'll see how we end up there, but always fascinating.
Great. I have one question, also a direct message here, so I don't know if other attendees can see it, but are there resources on MDA to help farmers find hay, is the question.
Yeah, good question. So we had talked about this quite a bit. One of the things people ask about is when was the last big drought that was, like we're at right now for especially northern Minnesota. And we say 1988 was the last big drought. And one of the things that's different since 1988 is the internet. And so that's what's really been helping us. And so you might see North Dakota Department of Agriculture and Extension has a hay exchange. And we talked about, with our groups and everybody, including Farmers Union, should we do something like that? But what we were really finding is farmers were using the internet already. It was just a matter of connecting them with the hay. And so if you look at our drought webpage on the front of our MDA website, we have we list a lot of the hay exchanges that are on there already in Minnesota. So if you're on Facebook, and most people are, there's a Central Minnesota Hay Exchange, there's a Minnesota Hay and Straw group. We list quite a few of them. We also just added Wisconsin groups because a lot of farmers we noticed were going just over the border. I live 10 minutes from the Wisconsin border here, and people were looking at that. We're also looking at adding auction barns because we have, like, I have the Rock Creek auction a mile from here, and people don't know where all the auction sites are to buy hay. So we decided at this time we're not adding a state hay exchange and doing that, and you putting the staff work in that, because we think people are finding it. It's just a connection of finding through that. We are considering if we need to create a hay bank in Minnesota. And it's something I'd love to hear Farmers Union is interested in this or helping with this, because it's unfortunate, but in the last couple of weeks, we have had reports of farmers who their animals don't look good, and people are reporting them to the police. And then we get the calls or different things. The police go out and look at it. The Humane Society gets called, but we're concerned that with drought in northern Minnesota, people are seeing the bare pastures and nothing for the animals to eat. And that doesn't mean they don't have anything to eat, but from the road, it looks like that. And so in other drought years, hay banks been created where we can provide emergency assistance and hay to farmers. And so it sounds good, but there's a lot of logistics that would have to happen to create that. But it's a interesting piece right now.
Great. So it looks like we have time for one more question before we wrap up. I've got a couple here. One of them is maybe a little bit simpler of a question, or broad at least. Harvest outlook. I know it varies. You kind of touched on it with the drought. I know southern Minnesota, where I'm from, it looks like harvest is going to be fairly early this year. I know my family's farm will be harvesting corn a heck of a lot earlier than usual. What are you seeing or hearing about harvest outlook?
I think it's a real surprise, to a lot of people so far. I think that we're definitely way ahead of schedule for a lot of people, but even in Northwest Minnesota where it's dry, people are surprised with their yields are coming in a little better, and we're hoping that we don't have to dry the crop too. I visited with some of our companies this week too about that outlook. Do we need to worry about propane or anything with that? And so that is a really, I'd say it looks good. I was in southern Minnesota a couple times this week, and that looks really good. Hearing just some awesome, looking at yields for crops. And so I think we'll be in good shape. We'll actually maybe a little ahead of last year in some of our, yields and everything in a lot of the parts of the state. But there are going to be swaths of the state where the crop is subpar, but definitely the drought is matured it a lot earlier. And some of our other more sugar beets, potatoes, those crops have all come in pretty solid this year too, and everything. But we are worried about our hay crop. I think the hay we went into this year with the third lowest hay on hand since 1950, and and so we'll see how that plays out. But a lot of farmers just didn't get that, and these rains that are coming in now will help stretch pastures into the fall, but the hay crop's just not there.
Great. Well, we're about 2 minutes here to the end. Any closing words, Commissioner?
No, I just really thank the opportunity to visit with Farmers Union members and anybody. I know a lot of the people are able to reach out to me and give us ideas either directly or through yourself and Stu and the great team that you have there at Farmers Union. I appreciate the opportunity to work with everybody, and I think that we just got to keep going and get through this year, and work on it together. There's no silver bullet for getting through a drought. It's a kind of all above, and but there's also a lot of opportunities with this ARPA funds that we'll be working on next legislative session. So I look forward to working with Farmers Union on that too as well.
Well, great. Oh, sorry for the feedback. Thanks for joining us, Commissioner. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, no, next week we'll be talking about farm safety. So it's a timely topic, and I hope you'll all tune in. This was season 1. We'll figure out our feedback issues and various other little kinks, but I think this was a great conversation, and thanks everybody. See you next week.